Okay, so, yep, we're doing this. How I was able to consciously write this script, I couldn't tell you, because I had to just relive all of the agony, the depression, the misery that Josh McDaniels has caused me in just 1.5 seasons on the job. So, hopefully you'll enjoy this mental breakdown for the next 30 minutes, because in just 2 years, Josh McDaniels took one of the most talented rosters in football and absolutely butchered it, making the worst possible decisions at every opportunity, pissing off the fans, pissing off the players, stubbornly sticking to his own selfish ways, and for the greater good of humanity in the pursuit of a warless future, he currently doesn't have a job. So that at least can bring me some peace, so that nobody else has to endure what he's done to me in the concrete wall that's had to listen to all my rants. So, without further ado, this is going to be one of the hardest videos I've ever had to make, and, you know, let the floodgates of pain open. So, as you may know, Josh McDaniels actually got his first head coaching job for the Denver Broncos way back in 2009, but his first stint went really well. I mean, I appreciated everything he did when he developed Brandon Marshall and Jay Cutler nicely before they were both shown the door, and then he took Tim Tebow and ruined all the chemistry in the locker room. So, I mean, I personally think it would have been pretty cool if he was the Broncos coach forever, but, you know, dreams are just dreams, right? And instead, Adolph marinated in New England for a few years until 2018, when he was prepared to take the head coaching job for the Indianapolis Colts. Instead, though, the Colts dodged a fucking world-altering nuclear vessel being dropped at their doorstep when McDaniels, I don't know, just didn't feel like it, and ended up terminating his verbal agreement with the Colts the night before his introductory press conference, and latched on to Thomas's pulsating rocket launcher for a few more seasons until he once again came a few signatures away from being the head coach of the Eagles, but no, he didn't feel like it was the right place for him until eventually a vacant position opened up for the Las Vegas Raiders, and he rubbed his little baby hands together and was ready to ruin another AFC team following the strict orders that Bill Belichick gave him to a T. But meanwhile, in Raiders land, you know, it was another average year for us after the 2020 season where John Gruden blocked Tom Brady and Gronk coming to Vegas because reasons. In 2021, Gruden made up for that by getting fired for being racist. Our first-round pick killed somebody. The other first-round pick was threatening to kill people on Instagram Live. John Madden passed away. Multiple other DUIs. And the wildest part of the whole season was we made the playoffs and ended up giving the eventual Super Bowl attendee Bengals a run for their money. So whatever head coach was inheriting this roster was going to be blessed with an uber-talented team. Max Crosby was one of the best young defensive players in the league. Derek Carr was still playing solid football. Josh Jacobs, Hunter Renfrow, Nathan Peterman, and Darren Waller were all Pro Bowl caliber players. So, I mean, you couldn't possibly fuck this up if you tried. And in the end, the Raiders had two options, and the front office and management had to get this right and handle this situation with the utmost respect and delicacy, because if they chose wrong, this franchise could be sent back a decade in time, and we surely don't want that now, do we, Mark? But hey, their leading two options at the time and head coaches seemed pretty great. The Raiders could have either brought back interim head coach Rich Bisaccia, who definitely wasn't much of an X's and O's guy, but he was able to create a culture, a brotherhood that this organization was built off of. And if he could rekindle the magic he brought in the latter half of 2021, then all Raiders fans would love to have him back. But my personal favorite option for the Raiders to take here would have been to hire Jim Harbaugh, because, I mean, he had the full package. He was intense, his players loved him, he was an offensive genius, and he even expressed interest in the Raiders' job. So, I mean, if we could just convince him to...
Mr. Josh McDaniels.
The Raiders hired Josh McDaniels and gave him a 6-year, $60 million contract. 4 years, $40 million guaranteed, but I mean, he's clearly earned that, right? Yes, he was a terrible coach last time, but he was young. Surely he's learned from his flaws, and we've always heard the man has always had a bit of an ego and also some Belichick-itis to him, but maybe that can be a good thing. But regardless of the negative perception at the time, they didn't care. We Raiders fans were just chained up, had our teeth pulled out one at a time, and were shaved hairless as we were forced to watch this lifeless heap of flesh we once called a football organization get sacrificed for the Patriot way. And My personal conspiracy theories are definitely a little bit out there, but I truly believe that he's as much to blame for this as McDaniels is. Do I have a ton of evidence for this? Not really, but I believe we brought in Josh McDaniels as a pawn to seduce the GOAT into coming to Vegas. That's what I think, because we know McDaniels and Brady had an extremely close relationship, and we also know that Mark Davis desperately wanted Brady and backed that up with business proposals in the future, but I'm sorry, I'm just passionate about this. So back to what I was saying. Like I said, people didn't like the Josh McDaniels hire because it was way too risky to give all that money to a guy with only negatives on his resume outside of New England. But for what it's worth, McDaniels wasn't the only guy to blame here. Obviously, ownership should get almost all of the fingers pointed at them again for hiring incompetent people for 20 years, but they also hired Dave Ziegler to become the general manager of the team, whose only goddamn qualification on his resume is that he was Josh McDaniels' roommate in college. I wish I was bullshitting you. So now the Raiders were in a very dangerous situation, because after bringing in Davante Adams, the best wide receiver in football at the time, because he was buddies with Derek Carr, and we also brought in Chandler Jones before we'll get there. The Raiders shoved all their poker chips to the middle of the table, which once again did not seem like the move given the volatility of the head coaching situation, but I guess we also were just planning on ignoring the fact that Patrick Mahomes was still in our division, while at the same time, the Chargers and Broncos were loading up too, and with a stacked AFC West entering 2022, it was clear to everyone that at least one of these four teams was going to fall on their ass and get impaled by a fucking titanium spike, but who that would be could only be answered on the football field, and boy, was it. So, in week one, unfortunately the power of friendship did not persist as the Raiders lost a hard-fought game to the Chargers, while the Denver Broncos ended up taking all the negative headlines and went into a week 2 game against the Arizona Cardinals with actual cautious optimism. McDaniels actually didn't look that terrible, and instead, all the blame went to Derek Carr, who had 3 interceptions and didn't seem comfortable in the McDaniels offense. So, I mean, this was all Carr's fault, right? Oh, naive Raider fan from week 1 of 2022. You have no idea how blessed you are to have not been cursed with knowledge, to have not yet witnessed the horrors, the nightmare that is to come, and you simply cannot understand how deep the problems run within this organization. And in week 2, the Raiders then hosted their season opener versus the worst team in the entire NFL in the Arizona Cardinals, and the vibes were so positive that I was actually excited to go to the game. I mean, just by looking at our offense on paper, there was no chance that we could lose this game. None. And sure enough, as the game got underway, we were demolishing the Cardinals. And at one point, we held a 20-point lead in the third quarter. Yeah, that's about right. What followed was one of the greatest tragedies of modern human civilization. I saw with my own eyes that I will never see again. The second that Kyler Murray completed this 2-point conversion, I knew we were f***ed. I already had a terrible feeling at halftime because I found myself enjoying life for like 16 seconds, but that was the real nail in the coffin, as while the Cardinals mounted a ferocious comeback, the Raiders' offense was absolutely stale. We couldn't do anything, and after not being able to stop the geriatric AJ Green, it was time for overtime, and with an easy chance to pound it to one of the best workhorse running backs of the last 10 years, Josh McDaniels had other plans and took to the air where Hunter Renfrow fumbled again, and the Cardinals scored a walk-off touchdown. And that was the birth of the Josh McDaniels era. For the next 2 weeks, the Raiders went back to being a boring-ish team, but on the third, we played against the Kansas City Chiefs in the midst of their vaunted dynasty run, and this was a matchup that everyone had circled on their calendar before the season started, because if we wanted to have a chance at a Super Bowl, even a playoff spot, we needed to prove we could hang with the Chiefs at Arrowhead, and we did. That's why this hurts so much. That's why I hate Josh McDaniels with every cell in my body, because we were blowing out the Super Bowl champions at one point. It was beautiful. Josh Jacobs was tearing them apart. Davante was unguardable, and all was well, up 17-0. So after we blew the lead, we proceeded to lose the game in the most Raider way possible, allowing Travis Kelce to score 4 touchdowns and peg us like he's done every year in his prime, and in a situation where just 30 yards would win the game with the best kicker in football, we fucking blew it. With Hunter Renfrow and Devontae slamming into each other, and then Tay slammed into a goddamn cable guy a few minutes later. Fun stuff. And it just kept getting worse. 2 weeks later, the Raiders got shut out 24-0 by a Saints team that didn't even come close to the playoffs. And by the time the Raiders held another huge lead against the Jaguars, it got to a point where it wasn't even funny anymore. It was too predictable at that point. So, I mean, now we were sitting at a 2-6 record, and along with the Broncos, proudly held the title as the most disappointing team in the entire NFL, as the players, media, and fans had already turned on Josh McDaniels for constantly botching games, stagnant offensive schemes, and mismanaging the talent on the roster. But once again, little did we know, the reign of horseshit that McDaniels was about to usher in had only just started, and we hadn't even gotten to the rising action yet. Jeff Saturday, the man, the myth, the PE teacher. A guy who had absolutely all zero relative head coaching experience in his entire life was all of a sudden hired to coach the Indianapolis Colts in the middle of an NFL season. The biggest middle finger to every single human being with a pulse on the Colts staff. So, with the Colts team morale relatively low and literally playing without a coach, in a Week 10 matchup anticipated by absolutely nobody, the Raiders handled business and turned their season around from there. So, Josh McDaniels then limped home after his 3-hour steam session with Jeff Saturday, a man who never won another game as a coach. Josh McDaniels went to sleep a happy man, knowing that he was the true master of comedy in the NFL. Now, the problem, though, was that most people didn't find his jokes funny. Not everyone did. Remember, at the end of the day, in the wise words of AP, this is a production-based business, and we weren't producing, and people were suffering as a result. And this loss to Jeff Saturday turned out to be Derek Carr's breaking point. And this is why I didn't ever want to have to make this video, dude. This interview hurt my soul. DC was in pain, and he knew at this moment in time he was not going to be a Raider any longer. His time was finished. It's just, this isn't ever what I wanted to remember Derek Carr for. I wanted to remember him for all the memories he gave us from 2016, his crazy comebacks, fighting through injuries, and just being an overall great guy. But Josh McDaniels truly broke him, and time again, whether it be Carr getting booed off the field in his last game in Oakland or constantly getting blamed for the offensive struggles despite having a revolving door of coaches and coordinators, he just never got the credit he deserved, and it was always Derek Carr's fault, so it was just so sad to see him like this. But Derek wasn't alone in feeling hopeless, not at all, because at this point from the outside looking in, it seemed like Josh McDaniels was running a death camp, with every player chained up and forced to sacrifice their personalities to his life-sized and concerningly warm Bill Belichick blow-up doll he had in his office, because at the end of the day, the players weren't happy, and shocking revelation here, if your players aren't having fun and aren't enjoying themselves, you're not going to win football games. And that's not just me saying some shit to say shit. No, our players literally told everyone, help, we are miserable. He's not trapped in a room with us, we're trapped in here with him. So this alone is already the worst start to any head coach's career ever, narrowly beating out the strong second place showing from Josh McDaniels. And he wasn't done yet, because at 2-7, being the most talented 2-7 team ever, eventually the talent became just too much, and eventually it seeped through as Josh Jacobs solidified himself as a top 3 back in football with a walk-off touchdown in Seattle, and after another win versus the Chargers, the playoffs were a possibility. All we had to do was run the table. Despite all of our players possibly trying to speak to law enforcement through Morse code in player interviews, we were still absurdly talented, like I've been saying, and then we faced off against the least talented team in the NFL, and how do I even explain this? Okay, so December 6th, the Rams signed Baker Mayfield, who just got cut by the Panthers. December 7th, he flies into LA, and December 8th, he's on the sideline for the Rams in a national football game. Like, not practice, a real game. Now, he obviously wasn't going to play. I mean, he didn't know like a single dude's name on the team, and he didn't even know a play. What's that? Oh, the Rams quarterback got hurt? Oh, Baker Mayfield's coming in. Oh. Well, this should go well. I mean, when have we ever struggled against a backup fucking quarterback without any knowledge of his team's plays in the past, right? It's never happened once. Never before. So, when we held another lead, blew it in the second half, got disgraced on national television, and let Baker Mayfield have a career game-altering drive that led to a game-winning touchdown against press coverage. I will say it again, against press coverage. After all of that, I didn't even feel anything. Honestly, I felt nothing. I remember exactly what happened that night. I finished my Raising Cane's, which I was eating at the time, in complete silence, and then I just grabbed a basketball and went outside and shot around for like 30 minutes. It was that kind of night. I've said it before, but for how much I hate that the Raiders do this to me, I am a genuinely mentally stronger human being because of this team. And that's pretty much the only positive I have here. Because after losing to Baker Mayfield without a f***ing playbook, the season ended on the most horrifying note possible. Josh McDaniels decided it was time to bench Derek Carr. The troglodyte just woke up on a random-ass Wednesday and, for salary cap / free agency reasons, said, you know what? I know I've already mutilated my quarterback's confidence beyond repair, but I got an idea. Let's ban him. Jesus, I can't believe this was real. Let's ban him from the fucking locker room, lock him out from the facility, and let's not let him say goodbye to any of the players or coaches he's been with for almost a decade. That'd be funny. And so, Derek Carr was benched. The only consistent thing with the Raiders since 2014 was gone, and Derek, being the bigger man, took it on the chin, didn't blame anyone, and I still can't do this, man. I'm going off script again. Do you know how fucked this was? Do you know how messed up this was? To take a guy who's been the franchise for the last 10 years and not even let him get a chance to say goodbye. They didn't even let him go out on his own terms and just backstabbed him. It was so fucked. It was so fucked. But you know what? That's just part of the Raiders experience, right? Just being sick to my stomach. So let me get back to the perspective of this being a comedy act, because with Derek's banishment, the locker room that had already clearly turned on McDaniels was now so depressed that locker room interviews were now just a coin flip between obviously broken men barely speaking or guys so impaired by the tax the season alone had done to them that they were just getting philosophical. Just listen for yourself, I guess.
A ton of respect for him for stepping up this week.
But for Davante in particular, remember, he was brought here purely to play with Derek Carr. So to see Josh McDaniels tear down his friend time and time again and to force him out of his home was weighing on him too. And let me just take a moment to thank Davante for all he's done for us. Seriously, Tay, if you're watching this somehow, it's been a pleasure to watch you play football. It really has. Anyway, we got snow-globed by the Chiefs to end the season, and after Josh McDaniels' first and somehow not only year on the job, we finished the year holding a 7-point lead on 10 different occasions. 10. And finished the year with 6 wins. And like I said, Josh McDaniels somehow kept his job, and news would only get worse for Raiders fans when it was said that no matter what will happen in 2023, Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler are going to get a chance to finish out the season. Lord help me. At this point, the bottle of bleach across the room from all Raiders fans' bathrooms was beginning to look more and more scrumptious by the day, but hold on a minute. Because the master plan of Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels was about to come to fruition. Calm down, everybody, because Thomas Edward Patrick Brady was about to come to Vegas, and for the first time, we're about to have a real, good...
I'm retiring. For good.
Huh. Shit. What do we do? Tom, no, please, come on. It's me, Josh McDaniels. Don't do this to us. Okay, don't panic. Nobody panic. We gotta get back Carr. Quick. I know we cut him, but Dave, call him. Call him right now. Tell him we're sorry. Tell him we take everything back we said about his wife and I love Jesus or whatever. Just bring him back, please. On it? Uh-huh. Yep. I understand. He told us to go f*** ourselves. Okay, what about Jimmy? Nobody wants him, right? I mean, he's like Carr, but thicker, right? Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, he even played for the Holy Patriots. Oh, the Patriots. Oh, Bill. Great idea. Let's ignore that he failed his physical and bring him in. Yeah, woo! we got a quarterback. Thank you. I'm quite the voice actor, I know. But what I'm trying to say is that after we failed to bring in Tom Brady, we begged Derek Carr to come back, and after getting ghosted from him, the Raiders brought in Jimmy Garoppolo. And the control freak also made it a mission to bring in as many former Patriots as possible, to the point where I don't even know how to fit them all on the screen. But yeah. At this point, we knew Jimmy G wasn't the future, and to be honest with you, from day one, something just seemed off. He just didn't seem like a Raider, but maybe he could have been a fine bridge QB if we did anything in the 2023 draft, but no. Instead, all we got was reports that Josh McDaniels himself shot down a trade that would have landed us CJ Stroud, but that rumor was allegedly debunked by saying that no, the only trade we were close to making on draft day was for the quarterback that McDaniels and Ziegler fell in love with, Bryce Young. And I don't know which report is even worse, to be honest with you. They're both equally horrific, and I still refuse to acknowledge that we drafted Tyree Wilson, by the way. That didn't happen. Which leads us to 2023, where everyone involved with the Raiders, fans and players alike, continued to just feel like POWs. And no matter how bad we played, it looked like there was no end to this torment. Mark Davis, for some reason, was an avid defender of McDaniels all the way to the very end, yelling back at fans to stop being a meanie to Josh and let him do his job. And the year was just getting tanked. After a strong week one, Jimmy G just deteriorated instantly due to something nobody could have predicted, injuries. And the McDaniels locker room presence just got to an extremely dangerous level. Not only did Chandler Jones' rants get pushed out to the media where he accused Josh McDaniels of being involved with Aaron Hernandez's death, but McDaniels' ego just couldn't be contained. And this is why people ever even remotely believed in him. Because, I mean, that was his main problem in Denver, among many, was his ego. This was a head coach that demanded Peyton Hillis be traded because he thought his wife was into him. This was a guy that would lose his marbles on the sideline in front of everyone. And as a Raider, that was supposed to change, but it didn't. Every report from Raiders players say he was just cold, inconsiderate, and almost mechanical. And to go from a caring coach and Rich Bisaccia to Josh McDaniels in a few months, I know I wasn't in the locker room, but it really seemed like the human element was lost, which is why this time period was just so depressing for us Raider fans. The Raider way has always been to be mean and intimidating, and when you think of the Raiders in the old days, you think of massive dudes with clubs for arms, huge hitters, and a punishing run game, and under McDaniels, he came in and immediately implemented his own way of doing things rather than working with and enhancing the skills, culture, and personalities of the team, and that, to me, is why he failed. You know, he's also a fucking moron, too, so that didn't exactly help. And he was just breaking our players, too. Carr, Devontae, Jacobs, Renfro, Waller, Crosby. These were all cornerstones of what was supposed to be the 2022 Raiders Super Bowl champion team, but in just one season, they all look like they've aged over 10 years, and midway through the 2023 season, Josh McDaniels was a dead man walking, and everyone knew it. But he needed to have one more signature obliviousness moment of how humans work before he was shown the door, as before a game versus the Chargers, the Raiders were forced to turn to rookie quarterback Aiden O'Connell, who was wearing the number 4 jersey. A jersey number deliberately given to Aiden, and obviously was the former jersey of Derek Carr. And although I can't confirm it myself, Josh McDaniels was certainly behind this. I mean, this was a guy who said he could turn any high school quarterback into an all-pro with Denver, so to me, this was just him trying to drag his ego on whatever was left of Carr's legacy as a Raider. Which would have hurt my soul, if I had one, because at this point, McDaniels took that from me as well. But then, it finally happened. After more casual Raider shenanigans like Marcus Peters liking posts to fire Josh McDaniels and losing to Tyson Bagent after a particularly horrendous game from Jimmy G where he couldn't do anything right. The curse was broken, as Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler were relieved of their duties, and our souls were returned to our bodies for the first time in years. But no, of course he just couldn't go down that easily, because although it sure as fuck wasn't a one-off thing, as we'd come to know, this Lions game was Devontae's breaking point. And here we are nowadays where he's requested a trade and is basically off the team and isn't playing because of a hamstring injury. So yeah, he is going to get traded any day now. And This was the second he knew he had to get out of here as quickly as possible. So, yeah, the final boss was finally defeated, but at what cost? Then, though, the healing process began, and apparently that started before the final game of his Raider career, where Raiders players and staff just blasted McDaniels for an entire meeting, to which McDaniels sat there and took everything. Except for one thing. He pushed back on a single statement and only defended the New England Patriots when they were mocked. Why did you hire this man, Mark? Tell me what you saw on his resume that made you think he was a good fit for the job. Why did you do this to us? But for the time being, we had freedom. Antonio Pierce still has a lot of growing to do, but he brought the swagger back into this team, and the locker room was just excited to have a human being leading the team again. As we ended the year off with a 63-piece on the Chargers, we beat the Chargers, and then in Week 15, we dropped 63 points on the Chargers. So the future wasn't bright per se, but the defense was playing hard, and we still sort of have a chance to be okay in 2024, I guess. But that's not the point, because the sad fact is that we already missed our window, and I really wish AP could have had a prime Renfro, a prime Jacobs, and a good Derek Carr, because right now that would change everything, but he doesn't. All because one man blew it. Josh McDaniels was put in a situation to simply manage the most talented roster we've had since 2002, and the only thing he and Dave Ziegler did was tear down each player physically and mentally, choke games in the most mind-bendingly excruciating ways possible, and lose the respect of every player, coach, and human in the facility. And that is why Josh McDaniels should never get another opportunity as a head coach, and why McDaniels has set the Raiders back 5 or 10 years. But even through all this misery, it's wins like the Chiefs game on Christmas last year that are going to keep me a fan forever. And no matter what this team just puts me through time and time again, for better or for worse, I'm always going to be a Raider fan. But anyways, if you like this video, I sure didn't, but if you did, then subscribe, because I got a lot of videos on the channel just like this one. And if you want to hear about someone else's misery, then I got a video on the New York Jets that I made a few weeks ago, and all of their misery throughout a, what was it, like 60-year franchise run? So it's pretty good, trust me. And thanks to all my patrons for pledging $1. It truly does mean a lot, but anyways, until next time.